Keith Livingston here from Healthy Intelligent Training. I've got with me today Kim Stevenson. Kim is a very good and very experienced coach from Rotorua in New Zealand, and he's got some interesting insights to share with us about what it was like to train with the phenomenal Masters athlete Jack Foster, and also perhaps we'll get to hear about training with Baillie, the great Bill Baillie, who was one of Arthur Lydiard's boys who reached world class.
Okay, Keith. Yeah, Jack Foster's one of the amazing characters of our running history, and it's really sad that he's passed on. Every time I drive out to the forest, I pass one section of the road out there, I think of Jack, because that's where unfortunately he was killed as he was on his bike. But I go back to when I was a teenager with Jack, and that was before he was really famous. I mean, he started running when he was 33. By the time he's 35, he was running well under 2 hours 28 for a marathon. But he loved cross country, and the man was a machine. And I'd have to say I did my first 2-hour run with Jack when I was 17. And I really, in retrospect, wasn't that fit, but it was, come on, we're going for a run. And we headed out some hills on the eastern side of town, and you're running up a hill on this farm, and Jack's talking, as though he's running along on a flat area going for a jog. And a real character. And that 2-hour run, the pace was all over the place. We were just about down the walking pace. We were running down hills like rockets. My other memories of it is I was so shattered when I got back home. I remember drinking heaps, and then I climbed into bed and I slept for 2 hours. So, because Jack had a family and he just did a full day at home. Did odd runs like that all the time. He was still new to the game. I was only I wasn't the only one. There was about half a dozen of us to go, and I didn't realise. And he was out every day. In the winter, he ran up on the farm behind me. I've actually got some trees in the road. I could show you the hills he trained on, and he did that in pitch winter, middle of the night, no light. He hit the fences a few times, run over that farmland every night. And we always wondered how he got so fit, but when you look at these hills, you can see why. He also used to spend, if he didn't feel right, he went for a bike ride. And I know when he became famous and was running in the top 10 in the Olympics sort of stuff, and 2:11 for a marathon. If he had a long run on a Sunday in the forest, which usually he hauled along fairly quick, if he didn't feel good on a Monday, he would just jump on his bike and go for a ride, and that wasn't uncommon. He used to ride a bike to and from work, but the distance wasn't that huge. But he would quite often spend a day on the bike if things didn't feel right, and that's one of the things I learned from Jack is if you're tired, you don't hammer the crap out of yourself. And he looked after himself really, really well. He made a comment once that he's famous for being a marathon runner. He says, I dislike the things. But he said, it gets me trips. But he loved cross country. And I think, he never ran veterans, masters. And I think about the late 70s, he got second in the New Zealand cross country champs. He was 50 years old.
Yeah, I remember that.
How many fit?
Yeah, very close to 50, yeah.
He also ran I'd moved to Auckland, and I hadn't done any running with Jack for a long, long time at that stage. Although every time I went to a cross-country race, because I was into sports cars by the time I was 21, and I had this little Austin Healey, and every meet I went to, Jack says, give us the keys. He wanted to go for a drive. And later on, he bought his own. He was into sports cars. But I'm changing the subject a bit. The last really good marathon I saw him run, but he was disgusted with it, was he ran 2 hours 20, just about 2 hours 20 flat at Auckland, and that was the Masters, over 50s record, but he was not happy with it.
Was that the Choicer Marathon, the Waterfront Marathon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was when it was the right distance.
Yeah.
The last runs I had with Jack were in the 90s, and he'd basically retired from running, and he'd only retired because he kept getting these minor injuries. So he was back on the bike, and that was basically his first love. And but he still ran when he could. And I was running back home from work. The school I taught at was about 10.5 kilometres away, and I was running down, and I wasn't that far from home, and suddenly Jack popped out of a street, and I don't know what sort of pace I was running, but Jack just came out, and he had to slow down considerably just to run with me. And he would have been well into his 60s then, and was yakking away. All I was doing was grunting or making funny noises because that's about all I could do. He was running so quick. But the last run I had with him, and it showed his sense of humour. It was an opening day at the club here in Rotorua, and we were in the forest. And some young guys, about 17 or 18, who were quite fit. In fact, they were students of mine and had done a bit of running with them. And I said, you run with the group, you don't take off. Well, they took off. We're pushing the pace. And I heard one of the guys say something to Jack, and I didn't hear what it was, but I had a feeling I knew what was going to happen. And we're running on this forest trail, and I knew there was a left-hand turn coming up that was going to go straight up onto a ridge, really steep climb for about a mile. Hard climbing, maybe just slightly less. And of course, as soon as these kids went past the exit, past that track, we took off up the hill like rockets. And we got to the top of the hill, and I noted that there was nobody under 40 at the top of the hill. We're all blowing hard. And I made the mistake of saying to Jack, "Oh, Jack, shall we wait for those kids?" And he said, "Since when did we wait?" I said, "Oh, you waited for me once." He said, "Oh, hell, I was crooked that day." So, yeah, brilliant sense of humour. And we trotted off, and these kids caught us up, and they stayed where they were supposed to be, back with the group. But that was the last time I actually ran with them. I was also good mates with Colin Smythe, who sadly was also passed away, and he was a close friend of Jack's. And one day, not long before Jack was killed, it was probably within about 2 weeks of him being killed, I was having a run from the club, and Colin was there, and he said to me, "Oh, Jack ran up to my house the other day from his place." And I said, "Oh, I couldn't work out exactly. I knew roughly where Colin lived." I said, "How far from his house to your house?" He said, "Oh, about 6 miles." He said he came up the house, had a chat, had a cup of tea, a bit of a yarn, he ran home. He was over 70 years old. I said, "What did he look like?" He said he looked as good as ever. Just the same. And he was well over 70, and of course, sadly, he was killed 3 weeks later. But yeah, amazing guy. Always had a...
He was actually on a very long ride, one of his long bike rides when he was actually killed. So he died in the saddle, literally.
Literally, yeah. And I know there was a bit of a worry because he'd had a crash about 6 months before that, and the helmet he was wearing split open, and they worried about a delayed concussion and stuff like that. And there's still a couple of people have got a theory that he had a bit of a blank spot because he actually turned in front of a car that was doing quite high speed, and they wondered if he had a blank spot. An interesting fact, a mate of mine used to ride with him, and he was saying that one day Jack said he would chuck his whole running career just to be able to be a Tour de France rider. That's how much hope. Yeah, and we said, but he's got one of the best careers of any athlete around the world. But that's how much he loved biking. Yeah, so that's probably the pocket history of running with Jack.
Yeah. The betting straight over
my landline.
Oh, okay. Well, won't worry about that. But anyway, the kid came in with his father, and there was this older guy in bed with a very young and attractive girl on either side in the bed saying, "Hi son, how can I help you?" And anyway, he signed it for him and sent him off. But that's the sort of knockabout sense of humour.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Nothing was sacred or out of bounds. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real character that way.
Yeah.
It was always a laugh. I know. At his funeral, his son, who was also actually a very, very good bike rider and bike builder, was saying that they went down south to South Island to do a ride one day, or 1 week, I should say, and they were climbing quite a big hill. I'm not too sure where it was. Jack was the oldest in the group, and the youngest was 24. And they got to this climb. I've got a sneaky feeling it'd be something like the Crown Range. And he said they started climbing, and of course the pace went on as people got a bit competitive to see who could climb. And he said as they climbed, he said they dropped off, the cyclists dropped off in the order of age. So he said the 24-year-old dropped first. And he said next, each, as they got, up the scale they went, and he said, and the final guy dropped, but Jack was still going. And he said they hit the top of the hill, and here was Jack sitting down having a cup of tea and a sandwich. And as they got to the top, he said, "What took you so long?" So he said there was no one there. There was a mug.
Yeah.
Jack just, and he was at that stage. I think he said Jack was 66. I think 65, 66, something like that.
Yeah.
So that showed the power of the man on a bike.
Yeah. Power to weight.
The youngest came first. Yeah, power to weight ratio. Because it was dripping wet, he weighed nothing.
Yeah.
It's as light as a feather. Colin Smythe told me somebody asked Jack in an interview what was the best race he ever ran, or the best fastest race he ever ran. And he mentioned that only hung up to Auckland race about 1973, and that everybody turned up. That was worthwhile. And Jack, in fact, I was in the race. It was not long before I went to the States, and I was fit, and I blew apart running down the hill into Newmarket. That's how fast we were going. And but they hit, just before they hit Newmarket, Jack realised that everybody there could run a mile faster than him. So, especially at the end, he would lose the sprint. So he ran a mile from basically Newmarket up through Parnell. He ran that mile in 4 minutes 20. And Keith, that's a lot of uphill.
Yeah.
He was clocked at 4 minutes 20 and dropped the field.
Yeah.
And he reckons that was probably one of the best, fastest runs he ever did.
I don't think anyone ever came near breaking it.
That's the one. Yeah.
I don't think they run it anymore because of all the newfangled insurance rules.
You go through Newmarket on a Saturday now, or even a Sunday, you tried that, you kill yourself. You're right, Keith, the record never got broken, but to drop a 4:20 mile in, on a hill, when you're 5 miles or so into a race, I mean, people would say that's Kenyan-esque stuff,
Yeah. Well, he was a white Kenyan, really.
Yeah.
Physically, he was just absolutely perfectly built for running, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, beautiful athlete.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen anyone run cross country as easily or as an enjoyer. I mean, he just loved it. Yeah.
And he used to go over those big high fences, just jump straight over them, didn't he?
Oh yeah. He'd go straight over them. He hit the odd one at night.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so in that Nationals you were talking about before, when he was older, you said he was about 50. I think he had an absolute sprint for the finish with a very good athlete, and I've forgotten who that was. Was it John Dixon or was it Martin Caldwell? John Dixon. Rod's older brother himself.
Yeah.
A very, very good athlete, John Dixon. He won just about everything going in cross country and road in New Zealand over the years. So,
and he was quite good mates with Jack as well. It was like being beaten by your best mate. So.
Yeah. I didn't see that race, but I heard all about it for sure because it created quite a few ripples, you know. And
Yeah, yeah.
then later on, I think he been out of training for a while for whatever reason. I think he got into hang gliding. Is that correct?
Oh, look, I was out of Rotorua at that stage. I'm not 100% sure. He did all sorts of things. And I know I mentioned sports cars. He had himself a little old MG and an old one, and he did a lot of work on it and that sort of thing and played around with that because he loved the one I had, which was old. And, so he did a lot of that sort of stuff. So I'm not 100% sure. But that's about the time he started getting leg problems, which was unusual for him because he always ran sensibly on different surfaces, but he started getting leg problems. So the bike became more and more of his exercise mode, but he still found he could run, but he couldn't run consistently. Interestingly, just mentioning that, and even today, if I took you to the Lake City Athletic Club, outside there is a tap with a hose on it, and that was Jack's idea. And he said, put the hose on the legs, and he'd seen racehorse owners do it to racehorses. So he thought, oh, well, it's good enough for a racehorse, it's good enough for me. And that hose and stuff is still there. Of course, all the PC people say, oh, yeah, you can't drink water and you can't do that, but it's still there. And some of us old hands on a hot day like today will have a run and do a jack, as they say. Go do a jack, yeah, we'll hose our legs down.
And moving on to maybe another great character in New Zealand folklore, Bill Baillie.
Great man. Phenomenal character. I actually wrote a piece which I put on a New Zealand distance running site about Bill because I wasn't one of the top athletes, but Bill, he gave his time to anybody who was prepared to run with him and prepared to do stuff. And lovely guy and an awesome sense of humour as well. In fact, I know he and Jack Foster got on quite well. I can imagine the banter between the two of them. Most people would laugh, and I know would be laughing hilariously. And I remember even things like, if you're going up Rotorua and you're getting onto Devil's Elbow and near the top there, if there was a few of the guys with Bill and he was thinking, oh, I might not make it, he'd tell a dirty joke or he'd do something. The next thing, there's 4 or 5 people on the side of the road laughing, and Bill's at the top of the hill first.
Anything to get to the top.
He's a real character. When I first met Bill, I was in the Lindau Club, and I'd been in the club about a year. And I was only a kid. I'd left Rotorua. I was about 17. And I was in the club, and this Olympic athlete was running with these guys. And I never saw him. And then I started work, and I was going up the Auckland Domain and having runs at lunchtime. And one day, this guy taps me on the shoulder, and I just about fell over, and it was Bill. And what are you doing, mate? How are you? And all that sort of stuff. And when I said I belonged to the club, he just burst out laughing. But we ran that for about 18 months, I think, probably close to 2 years. We would run, I'd say, between 3 and 5 lunchtimes a week. I'd run up from the office I worked at, he'd meet me there, and we'd have a run. And it was every day. I don't think the pace dropped. It was not hard. We'd be lucky to do 7-minute miles. And most of the time, I'd just run and listen because Bill never stopped talking. And he'd talk about anything, anytime, and puff and blow and carry on. But every lunchtime, and we just clipped that out. I used to think, I wonder if this is all the training you do, but I found out it was later to go for another run that night. And of course, I did the same thing. I'd go for another 5 or 6 miles that night as well. So I did a lot of running with him, and after I'd started that, I mentioned this article, it was the Round the Harbour relay in Auckland, which is another relay, sadly, that's gone, and very big, very popular relay in Auckland. And I was on a Club C team because Lindau was, like all those big clubs in Auckland, were very strong in those days. And it was a handicap start, but and there was really no mugs in the team. Everybody, I think the whole team, everybody could run well under 3 hours for a marathon, probably all under 2 hours 50 for a marathon. We were the C team, and I had the last leg from Newland to Greylin, and the word went out that we were sitting in, one of the guys had pulled us up into third place. And then I was standing there waiting for mine, and a guy came through. I didn't recognise him. And the guy took over from him. I didn't know them. And then suddenly I saw this guy getting ready to take over the next runner. It was a guy called Dave Carl. And Dave had run a pile of miles, 4 minutes 1, 4 minutes 2 on grass tracks through the mid-60s. Even in Snell and Halberg's books, you read, Dave Carl was in the race. And I thought, oh my God, I've got to try and, because the guy said, you got to catch these guys and win the thing. And I got Dave actually about 2 miles from the start, and I was quite surprised. Of course, I found out afterwards he wasn't fit at all. But got him, and I got the other guy, and I got up to Point Chev, just before Point Chev, and because it all doesn't exist now. There's a Spaghetti Junction there now, but it's quite a little nasty climb. And next thing, this old Series E Morris van that Bill had, he and Val were in it, and he suddenly stopped, and he jumped out, and Val sat in the driver's seat, and Bill sat in the passenger seat, and they literally drove alongside me. Not that they couldn't drive alongside me the whole time, but they were all the way to Greylin and Western Springs, and the whole time he just talked me through it, have a word, then the next stop he'd have a word, and then I was really worried about Chinaman still up to Greylin. I remember that vividly, and I flew up the thing. I couldn't believe it. I was tired, but and Bill was just, keep it rolling, man, keep it rolling. And we won the race, and he was so excited. And I thought, this guy's an Olympic, finalist, top 6 in the Olympics, and he just loved it when, there was a bit of success that he contributed to, and that's something I found with him. No matter what, he got a big thrill out of it as I did. One of the statements he made, he said, I'm not that good a coach. I was a better runner, but actually I'm just really wondering if he was actually a better coach, because he had a lot of guys. At one stage, he had guys running 30, 40 for 5Ks. He had the Healy boys down at the 8:30s for steeplechase, stuff like that. He was still running. He was able to run with you. And that was the thing that I think helped a lot. And another lesson I learned from him, and that I actually still use in my coaching today, is I learned how to do the Lydiard time trials with him. And we would do them at a club night, okay, it's a 5K time trial tonight. And he would run along steadily, and if you picked the pace up, there'd be a hand on the back of your shorts and you got hauled back. No, just keep the pace steady, keep the pace steady. And we'd be running those things, and we were quite young. We were running 16:30, for say a half effort time trial. Everybody crossed the line thinking, you wouldn't do that on your own, because you'd probably either go too quick, too early, or, turn it into a race. And usually we'd done about 3 or 4 miles running before, then we'd do the time trial, and then we'd have a 3 or 4 mile run afterwards. So, quite a big day. But I learned how to do that with Bill. We ran quite a few of those, and I found them, I know when I got to the States and I do that same sort of stuff, the guy said, you can run almost to the clock, just perfect. Because he talked all the time, and I tried to be a big sponge and get as much information as I could, but he mentioned that somebody asked him about his sub-4 minute mile, because he only ever ran one, and he said the year he did that, he never broke 30 seconds for 200 in training, because he thought, it's over, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to be good for my mile. I'm starting to do my long stuff, and got out to 5K, and of course he 20,000 metre world record holder. But he said, I never broke 30 seconds for 200. And then he said, I will roll down to Wanganui to run this mile, and he runs 3:59. I always was fascinated by that. And then when I was in the US, I got really sick one summer because I ran too many miles and foul conditions. I got overtrained. well, I overtrained myself. And I came right pretty, once I got over that and rested up and stuff, I was behind on training, and the coach said to me, "Oh, you need to smash out speed work. You need to smash out speed work. You know, we need to get you back on." And I said, No, I'm not doing that. Another thing I did with Bill was tons of 200s. He loved the things. You know, you go out and run 10 200s in 34 seconds, stuff like that. Anyway, I'd go onto the track and the coach say 200s, and I would not break 30 seconds. I said, no, I'll run these. And I won something like, I have to pull a diary out, but I ran something like 4 or 6 mile races, all dual meets and quadrangular meets, and I was running the last 600 of them in under a minute 30. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was running the last 800 under 2 minutes because a lot of them were tactical, because you're wanting the points and you're running for placing, you're not running for time. And but I found I was running a lot of that stuff, and my last 600 was the best part of the race, but I never broke 200. And every time I crossed it, I went, "Thanks, Bill. I got that from you."
Yeah, so the moral of that is steady, controlled work is often more valuable than harder, more intense work.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So now, he was so good to many athletes. I know there's a picture in one of the book on Arthur's Boys, and it shows everybody sitting in Bill's. Just says having a cup of tea at Bill Baillie's place, and this is long before I got into running. And it was a house at Methuen Road, and I wondered, I've done that. I've done exactly. I can still see the view out that window, even now, years later. And I just wonder how many athletes would be drinking tea at Bill's on a Sunday morning after a long run. It must, the numbers there. How Val put up with it, I don't know.
Well, she was brought up with running. That she was.
Of course she was. Yeah,
Jeff Julian's, the great Jeff Julian's sister, wasn't she?
Going strong, but he had time for everybody, which was really neat.
Yeah. So, my memory of growing up and running in Auckland from the mid-70s, anyway, was very social, extremely social, and we used to have these big pots of tea. I did a lot of my running with, say, Chris Pylone and those guys, but the big pot of tea afterwards was ubiquitous. And we got into a bit of trouble once at a Chinese restaurant in town, which had a eat all you can for $5 sort of bargain on a Sunday. A whole lot of us guys who just been for the long run barreled down to Queen Street to this poor little Chinese guy's restaurant, hoe into all the food, all you can eat for $5, and a whole lot of distance runners who run the Rotorua are very hungry, and we have a bottomless pot of tea or a bottomless urn of coffee, and all you can eat for $5. And after a couple of weeks of this, and then we invited some of the discus throwers along. That was too much for the Chinese restaurateur. And he came up to us almost crying, saying, "We love your company, we enjoy you, but please, can you, we've got to make a profit."
Speaking of pots of tea, just a few years ago, my daughter was at University in Wellington, and she flattered me where the Scottish club rooms are. And so I went along there to have a run with all the old guys. And what I was really wrapped with is, as you said, Keith, social. Afterwards, these big pots of tea, and we all drank, and it was sort of late winter, early spring. Everybody was quite, had sweated quite profusely, but I just thought, that's what this whole thing was about, the social thing, and pots of tea, and, no one was opening a beer till they'd had their tea. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
We don't have big group runs anymore. The young guy I coach does all his long runs on his own. Because no one can run with him, which is just be unheard of back in the 70s.
Thanks, Kim. That was great. Really appreciate it. And we might have another talk another time.
Thanks very much, Keith.